We also have the Browns adding a lot of drama wherever you may be, wherever you may go. The Browns seem guaranteed and destined to bring some ridiculousness with them. So on the unfortunate side, it now appears that the Browns head coach, Kevin Stefanski, is not going to be able to coach in the first playoff game for Cleveland in 18 years. And the line has moved. We got other coaches, other players that have tested positive for COVID. I'm going to get to that in a minute and tell you my theory on what should go on there. But as if that were not enough, two different Browns players were caught drag racing on their day off, which is just absolutely perfect for the Browns. Now, on the Kevin Stefanski front, I don't understand. So I saw Gottlieb tweet about this, I think, but Kirk Herbstreit called the national title game from his house. Sorry, the playoff game between Ohio State and Clemson from his house here in Nashville, where I live as well. We have got people calling games everywhere, remote, all over the country, because travel is not for sports occurring as frequently as possible. The reason why Herbstreit had to call that game remotely was because he had tested positive for COVID. So, question for everybody out there, why can't the NFL figure out a method by which Stefanski could be allowed to coach a game remotely? It's the playoffs now. We have, I would think, the technology to allow this to occur. He's got to put on a headset. I'm not saying that he has to call every single play or anything else, but I said the same thing back when Nick Saban tested positive for COVID. I don't understand why they couldn't get an all-22 version of the game, just like he was there, and allow him to sit and watch that, maybe with also some sort of sideline view, and make decisions in real time, just like there were an offensive or defensive coordinator sitting up in the press box. I don't know that there are very many people that would be opposed to this, and it seems like it's a lot better of a solution than suddenly requiring a team, once they reach the postseason, to adjust the way they've done things all year long and actually allow a guy to call the game from in some form of remote viewing area, maybe inside of his home, maybe inside of somewhere at the Browns facility, their practice facility, their, where you've got it set up so nobody else is around him, so there's no actual danger that's involved, to the extent that there's any danger at all in the first place, because everybody who has tested positive basically in athletics has had almost zero issue, and almost everybody has been asymptomatic. But don't you guys think that makes some form of sense, that the Browns haven't been in the playoffs in nearly 20 years? It feels like it's a cruel and unusual punishment to now not allow their head coach to be involved. And by the way, this is something that could certainly arise going forward as well. And there's some people out there who are talking about, hey, could we have a postponement in the NFL? Obviously, we're talking about college football with Alabama and Ohio State. The rumors were there might be a postponement. With one game remaining, I don't think they should change. Let me break down both of those scenarios for you. In college football, if I'm Alabama and there are issues with Ohio State right now related to COVID, I'm not making the decision to change the date of the game at all, because there's no guarantee that if Alabama changes the date of the game, that they might not have their own COVID issues in a week when they try to replay it a week later, right? That could just as easily happen again, and I'm not going to get all worked up about that. If I'm Alabama, I want to play this Monday. Not to mention that I do think, while Kristen Saban walked back what she tweeted, there is the rumor out there that Justin Fields has got some health-related issues because of the big hit that he took against Clemson. and that he might not be 100%. Now, I'm sure they're going to give him a shot again, just like they did beforehand, so he may be able to go out and play fine. But I would understand that argument of how they would like to have an extra week, and unlike in the NFL, where we get really detailed explanations health-wise, COVID and otherwise, related to whether or not somebody's able to play, in college football, they never really let you know who's actually tested positive for COVID, who's actually being contact traced. None of that is ever actually explained in a really totally cogent and understandable manner, and it didn't happen all season in college football. So, if I'm breaking this down, there's no way if I'm Alabama that I'm remotely interested in waiting another week to play against Ohio State, because if Ohio State's got COVID issues, there's no guarantee that a week from now Alabama won't have COVID issues. So I think you play the game sooner rather than later. That's the report. Now, in the NFL, there are a lot of people starting to ask the question, well, what if the Browns have more COVID-related issues? Are they going to play it this weekend? And I think the answer is yes. I think you have to play. I don't see any way to postpone. And some people say, well, just wait a week and then give everybody a bye week. That's an argument that's out there because you got a bye week between the AFC, NFC title games and the Super Bowl. The challenge with that is, and it's a big challenge, we don't even know who would be playing who until we get the game between the Browns and the Steelers, right? Because if the Browns win, there's probably a very good chance, barring an upset from the Colts, that the Browns would be going on the road against the Chiefs. But if the Steelers win, the Steelers would be playing against the Bills. So you can't even schedule any of the other games either. And this now begins the challenge with 6 games going on Wild Card weekend and with 4 games going on divisional weekend. A lot of people out there, and I think this is fair to say, you have to be more afraid of your top players or maybe your coach testing positive for COVID than you do that you're actually going to lose a game against a big-time opponent. Because the biggest fear, if I'm right now a Kansas City Chief fan, is not that we're going to lose to somebody, although, look, it's the playoffs in the NFL. Anything can happen. But your biggest fear is that Patrick Mahomes might test positive for COVID and not be able to play in the game. And if you're a Buffalo Bill fan, your biggest fear is that Josh Allen might test positive. Or if you're a Packer fan, Aaron Rodgers said he was asked his advice that he was going to give all his teammates, given their bye week, it was don't get COVID. And that's accurate. Because if your team is a favorite, the worst thing that can happen is your quarterback or your head coach suddenly comes down with COVID. So we come back in. I'm going to bring in the crew. I want to get their opinion on the Kristen Saban off the top rope on the Ohio State Buckeyes and how quickly her phone rang with Dad saying, hey, what are you doing, knucklehead? Maybe don't give the opposing team a lot of bulletin board material here from Nick Saban's daughter, no less. And I also want to ask the question, I may put up a poll question on this, why can't a head coach in the NFL, now that we're into the playoffs, why can't there be a setup to allow him to call the game remotely just like he would if he were on the sideline? What are we losing from a competitive balance if there is an ability to set up a guy like Kirk Herbstreit to call the game between Clemson and Ohio State when he had COVID? They set it up in his house. Why couldn't there be a setup in Kevin Stefanski's house or in his or potentially in his office with the Cleveland Browns, wherever he might need to be, where he is quarantining? Why couldn't a tech team come in, set him up, allow him to put on a headset, and actually be involved in directing decisions in coaching his team remotely?